Everyone and their grandma loves the SCHD ETF, but SCHD is far from free money, and today we're going to be going over SCHD's recent dividend payment, share my updated thoughts on the ETF itself, share a few concerns that I have long term with the ETF itself, share what I'm doing with in the future, and so much more. If you love your dividends from SCHD, you are sure to love the Do Dividend Stocks Not Drugs merchandise. Check out some awesome shirts, some mugs, and you may even get a baby blue one so you can be matching with your favorite ETF. There's a sale through Christmas of 15% off. With all the money you're going to be getting from that SCHD dividend, why not help support a channel and get an awesome shirt in return? With all that out of the way, roll the Christmas intro.
Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus.
Please, it's too much winning.
Reindeers blowing on the...
Hello, I like money.
So a lot of people were anticipating SCHD's last dividend payment amount that happens on December the 11th. Now, a lot of people were anticipating this because it would show their total yearly amount, which would basically allow them to compare dividend growth from last year. And overall, they're going to be paying a 74-cent dividend on the 11th, making their total dividend payments for the year 3.8% more than it was last year. Now, I think this is honestly solid, even though it is way below where their dividend growth history has been in the past. This year, a lot of dividend stocks have been getting smoked, but is the lower dividend growth a sign of a bunch of weak, dying, or slow-growing businesses in SCHD? We surely wouldn't want to be holding those in our portfolio if that's the case. We'll get into that, but I think it is important to keep in mind that over the last year or two, a lot of the companies that SCHD owns have been getting smoked for no particular reason to their business whatsoever. A lot of companies like utilities, telecoms have been impacted by higher interest rates, which overall is going to slow down those dividend payments and dividend growth from those companies, having a lesser dividend payment from SCHD. This is definitely a short to medium term issue and nothing that the US economy and stocks haven't seen overall, so I'm not worried whatsoever. Now, part of what makes SCHD so appealing for a lot of dividend growth investors like myself is the high dividend growth standards that they've had in the past, with dividend growth rates being ranging from 10 to 15%. Now, over the long term, I don't know if it'll be sustainable at that rate, but I'm hoping for a good 8 to 12%. Another thing to keep in mind that SCHD did this year was the massive rebalance that they had in their portfolio, where they sold a lot of high yield, slower grower kind of companies and invested in some more dividend growth-ish companies that over the long term should quite literally pay dividends for them. Investing into companies like AbbVie will allow SCHD to continue this good dividend growth that they've had. So let's get into the SCHD Holdings, and I want to share a few concerns that I do have potentially for my personal objectives when it comes to investing, and especially being a large shareholder in SCHD. If you don't know, SCHD makes up roughly 10% of my current dividend portfolio at the moment. I have had possible thoughts of selling part of that and just putting it into the S&P 500, but I'm having trouble setting up a Roth IRA, so that's kind of on hold for now. SCHD, looking deeper at the companies, overall, it's a good ETF. I don't think it's the best, and I don't think it's great, which has kind of led me to potentially think of exiting out at a good point. But the largest holding in SCHD is a big red flag for me, which is Verizon, stock ticker VZ. Now, is Verizon going out of business? Not whatsoever. But let's be honest here, Verizon's growth is very limited, and you know what you're going to get every year with investing in Verizon. Their dividend growth is a subpar, their growth overall is subpar. It's just overall not a business that in my circumstances, as young as I am, that a business that I want to be fully invested in. The top 5 holdings in SCHD are Verizon, Amgen, Broadcom, Coca-Cola, and Merck. Now, personally, in my own portfolio, none of these stocks would be close to what I would consider core holdings in my portfolio, which are essentially, the over 10% weightings. I am very confident in their business overall. I will say, out of these 5, I do think Broadcom has a lot of good growth potential, and I'm happy that they're invested in that. But Coca-Cola, it's kind of in the same boat as Verizon. You're going to only have so much limited growth ahead of it. I think Amgen is solid as well, but ideally, I don't see any of these companies really breaking a core holding if I were to own them in my portfolio, which I don't. The point I'm trying to make here is that these are a lot of good companies, but in my circumstance, I want great companies. I want companies that are large growers, have a lot of growth ahead of them, new markets to tap into, and more. And a lot of these businesses and more of the holdings kind of have the same repetition here. They're good companies, they're nothing crazy ahead of them. I think investing in an S&P 500 index fund over the long term could be the better move. But the reason that I have stayed invested into SCHD is that they're allocating more focus right now in the short term of buying into maybe some lower yielder, higher grower stocks, which is the reason the payments and dividend growth have been lower recently. SCHD also does give me some solid exposure to some companies that I'm not invested in right now in my own portfolio, like BlackRock, Home Depot. Now, let's look at SCHD's performance over the last 5 years compared to the S&P 500 index fund. Now, I think to keep in mind, this is still relatively short term for my investing, time frame. I'm a long-term investor, and for me, long-term is 30, 40, 50 years. So I wouldn't take too much attention really into the short-term performance kind of things. I know a lot of YouTubers like to look at that. But there's about a 13% outperformance right now from the S&P 500, and let's keep in mind, not that long ago, SCHD was outperforming, just a few months ago actually. My point is, this kind of thing fluctuates a whole lot when it comes to short-term performance. So, don't look too deep into it. Is SCHD going to outperform the S&P 500 over the long term? We'll see. I think it really determines on how much tech allocation that SCHD gets in the portfolio. I think it's a big reason that they're underperforming right now overall and total return-wise is because of the lack of exposure to tech, where the S&P 500 is literally made up of tech. Overall, though, I do expect SCHD to pretty much keep in line with the S&P 500. If not, maybe underperform a little bit due to the higher dividend demand that they have, where the S&P 500 is more focused on total returns. A lot of people are investing in SCHD for the dividend income side of things, to quite literally live off the dividend income. Now, I know that the variability of the dividend amount that is paid every quarter can be kind of fluctuated as we saw this year. I also have covered multiple times in SCHD videos on my channel of the high qualifications for stocks we actually put in the SCHD ETF itself. So what am I going to likely do with my SCHD? Well, I think it would be stupid for me to sell out of my currently compounding position in SCHD. So, as long as SCHD is around 8 to 10% of my portfolio weight, I plan to continue holding and reinvesting my dividends just back into the ETF. Now, is there a possibility of me potentially trimming some of my SCHD and putting into the S&P 500? This video is sponsored by DividendData.com. If you're looking for the best investing software on the market to research stocks, track your own portfolio, and do so much more, it's DividendData.com. Use my link in the description. It greatly helps the channel. With your SCHD dividend, not only can you buy the Do Dividend Stocks Not Drugs merch, you can definitely at least try out DividendData.com for 1 month. I think my favorite feature of it, though, is the new watch list feature that they added. So while I'm on my school laptops, the best unblocked investing software to use is DividendData.com. Back to the video. Look, at the end of the day, SCHD is a quality ETF when you're comparing it to Cathie Wood's ETFs and Tesla. With that said, though, is it better than the S&P 500? That's up for debate for sure. I think with some of the companies that they hold right now, I think at the current state, it is not better than the S&P 500. With that said, though, over the long term, with some of the transactions that they're making in the portfolio towards growth and the better trends that I'm seeing from the SCHD management when it comes to some of the stocks that they're making core holdings, I'm definitely bullish on them long term. Right now, my SCHD position is compounding. I'm currently up on the ETF itself. Let me know in the comments section how many SCHD shares do you own and what are you doing with the ETF with the lower dividend growth this year. I'd love to hear it. Once again, thank you all so much for the merch and DividendData.com. Look at the links in the description. Thank you all, and do dividend stocks, not drugs. Have a good one.